All right, at this point, we're going to bring our April 4th finance meeting to order. Are there any public comments at this time?
There is none at this time.
Okay, with that being said,
Okay, thank you, Mr. Winchester. So tonight we're going to talk final proposed budget. We have some really good news. I know we touched on this at the last meeting. So again, we are third lowest in millage in Montgomery County with 23.995. Go to the next page. The Act 1 index this year is 3.4. You'll notice on this slide that with the increase of assessments throughout the Colonial School District, we have now adjusted the value of a mill. It used to be like 3.9, now it's 4.1. So that's how much our assessed value has grown just over the last year. So now if we did raise the millage to 816, which is the max, we would bring in about almost $4 million. So the budget considerations that we took under advisement, obviously the pandemic status, we're hoping that we're at the endemic portion of the pandemic so we can get back to normal. Local economy, especially in our school district, seems to be picking up, and we made it through sort of unscathed. Student enrollment is always a big issue when putting a budget together. We are projecting that we're going to pick up some kids. For those kids that didn't attend kindergarten the last couple of years, or were in a charter school, we're hoping to bring them back. So that has to do with our personnel. So we're looking at increasing enrollment means increasing our teaching staff, and you'll see that we do have new teachers in this budget because we want to keep our student to teacher ratio as low as we have it right now. Right now it's about 13 students per teacher, which is really good. We have our wages and salaries we have to consider. We settled a couple contracts. We just have the administrative agreement to go yet, but we are committed through those collective bargaining agreements for those obligations in the future. Employee benefits are always a big one. Pension, we know the problems that's caused over the past few years. Sort of settled in, but it's still at a very high rate of almost a little bit over 35%. And our health care benefits, which have been going up this year, we got some really good news. So that was a positive. Special education is always we're committed to servicing the kids that need the extra services. With the increased enrollment, obviously there's going to be a percent of those kids that are going to need extra costs, so we have to keep that in mind. Charter school enrollment and tuition, there is a very good proposal that's on the table from the governor. We don't know if that's going to be enacted before the start of our fiscal year, but we're keeping our fingers crossed. And then the use of fund balance, which we've been discussing for the last 4 or 5 months, that we're going to be using some of our fund balance. So looking at the projected revenue, and there's a detail behind all this as an attachment to board docs, you can see that we are, I put in the 2021 actual, and you can see it's at $139 million. The budget for this year was almost 138, but we got a lot of about $1 million extra of federal funds last year than we had expected, and we won't be getting those this year due to the pandemic. And then we have our 22-23 projected, and you can see that the local went up because we had the assessment from February come through. We're still waiting for March. We still have April and May to get the assessment increases because we're having a brisk real estate market, so those assessments continue to rise. We did budget additional funds in the state revenue, basic ed. Now, we don't get a whole lot of state revenue, so we're looking at $86,000 increase of basic ed, which is a 2.5% increase for us. And special ed, we are budgeting an $82,000 increase, which is a 3.28% increase. So just without even considering any tax increase, we are looking at our revenue increasing $4 million or 2.93%. So that's a nice reflection of the local economy and the local real estate market. So on the expenditure side, personnel costs account for 72% of our annual budget. We do have 6 new positions included in the final proposed budget. That may increase or decrease depending on the next month and a half and the enrollment we get in kindergarten. But we feel very comfortable that we can fund those right now. We do look at how many retirements we have, how many terminations we have, and then with the Teamsters and the CESP collective bargaining agreements completed, we have a pretty good picture of what we're looking at from a personnel standpoint. Medical, we have received our first look, and then the second look came in February 28th. We are expecting the third look to come in this week. It was not ready for today, so we're hoping that that's going to stay in the decrease mode that we've been in. You can see the first look was medical down 3.2, second look not quite as good, still down 1%. You don't normally see that. And prescription, 34.4% decrease with the first look, still a pretty respectable 30% decrease in the second look, and then overall 9.2% in the first look, and then this budget includes a 6.6% decrease in our medical premiums for next year. Last month we talked about the fund balance that we have with the consortium. We are slightly over the limit that the consortium has imposed on school districts. So to remedy that, we included in the budget this year that the month of December of 2022, we will be taking what we're calling a healthcare holiday. Sorry about that. And that will save us about $1 million. And what we intend to do is we're not going to take any money out of the employees' paychecks. We're not going to send any money to the consortium, which is averages about $1 million a year. And that way we'll see our fund balance reduced by $1 million and saves that out of the budget. And then the PSERS liability we're looking at for this year, it was announced and certified in December at a rate of 35.26. And it's projected to stay at 35% and almost up to 36% over the next 20 years. So here's our expenditure budget. You can see that we have wages going up 5.46%. Across the board, it's about a 3% raise, but we have those additional positions in there. We do have some people that are moving columns, so we budget for that. We have other people that are hitting a 5 or 10 year anniversary in the clerical area, so they get a slightly higher bump than the 3%. Benefits are going down by $323,000 or 0.83. That's net of the new positions. So that's you normally don't see benefits going down because PSERS is going up, Social Security going up, but because the medical is coming down so much, it nets out to be a $300,000 savings. Professional services, that's where we're seeing some of our special needs and some of our substitute services. We do expect that to go up by about 2.5% next year, or $135,000. Contracted services, Joe's area plus our leases are up $24,000 or 1.5%. Our purchase services, which is where we pay our tuition and our transportation costs, are only going up 0.75. We still have the problem with our bus driver shortage, but we are projecting that we're going to come back a little bit from that. And also, the charter school has sort of calmed down from where it was 2 years ago and is slightly decreasing, so we're getting those kids back in our schools. Supplies, you can see that's going up $498,000, but which is 9.44%. But that is where we budgeted a lot of the ESSER 3 money that we have budgeted. By the time is all said and done, it may be spent on technology leases or wages. But right now, for the final proposed budget, we have it in our supplies. Equipment's down only because the equipment is purchases over $10,000, and we don't have a lot of equipment budgeted for this year. And then our interest and fees, you can see that that's where a lot of our debt service comes from. The interest is going up because of our financing recently, and we did wrap around debt, so we're paying a little bit more interest, and the debt service is down. That's a principal of $210,000, so those sort of offset. But we're looking at total expenses going up 2.69%. So looking at the budget summary, we have revenue of 141, almost 142 million budgeted, and our expenditures are at almost 145. We're looking at a deficit right now of $2.851 million. The deficit, this deficit will require a 0.668 mil increase or a 2.87% tax increase, which is less than the Act 1 index. But if we go to the next slide, we talked about using some of our fund balance to reduce the impact on our taxpayers. So we are proposing in this final proposed budget to use $1 million of our fund balance, therefore reducing the deficit to 1.851. And that would equal, if we funded that by a tax increase of 0.447 or a 1.86% tax increase, which means that for every $100,000 assessment, that taxpayer would be paying almost $45. So 200,000 being 90, 300,000 being 135. So that's the budget we have. So we're going to continue to monitor the revenue. Like I said, we are expecting the March assessments to come through any day. We have the April and May to wait for. Normally, we can't wait for the June because we need the final budget document prepared. We are still reviewing all the budgeted information from buildings and departments. We had a meeting on Friday with curriculum. We have to make a slight change. That will not appear in the final proposed budget, but it will appear in the final budget. It's only about a $35,000 to $40,000 increase. We're going to continue to monitor our student enrollment and our kindergarten registration and evaluate the need for the new positions and figure out if the 6 we have in there are enough or if we can do with less or we have to add another one. So April 21st is the next board meeting where we're going to have the final proposed budget on there for adoption. We are then going to be publishing the PDE 2028, which is the budget document which we put out for public review. The final proposed budget must sit for 30 days before we can act on a final budget. And since May's meeting is so late in the month, we can't do that before the June meeting. So that's why we're proposing the final proposed budget in April. We do have a May 2nd and June 6th as scheduled Finance Committee meetings, and we'll review any further changes. And then the final adoption would be scheduled for June 16th.
Dave, with that use of $1 million, what does that leave our fund balance?
I knew you were going to ask that, so let me
So you are prepared.
Yes, I was. All right, so I think you're used to seeing this this document. If you look over to the right-hand side, let me see if I can reduce this down here. You can see what our fund balance was as of March 31st of this year. And this is after we moved some money from the unassigned into the capital reserve and the middle school fund. So we have $30 million. We are projecting to use $3.2 million to balance this year's budget. So that would put our overall fund balance at about $27 million. So we are projecting, you can see I started this where we would be at the 0.66 or 688 or 672, I think it was. So if we did it all with a tax increase, we would keep our fund balance intact. But the highlighted in green is the 0.447 mil, which is 1.86%. And that would reduce our fund balance by the $1 million, and we would be down to $26,045,000.
And are we, I know I ask you this every year, are we expecting any big developments or buildings to come online between now and then?
Well, we do have projected in there. We did meet, we revived the meetings with the local townships and Conshohocken. So we did get a list of developments that are on the books. And we are projecting that we're going to see, like the across from Plymouth Elementary, they're still building like crazy. We see those come online in assessments. So we're thinking we're going to see more and more as we head into the April and May assessment increases as they continue to finish those houses and sell. Conshohocken has been just a lot of properties transferring hands. And every time they transfer hands, we get a transfer tax, and then it increases the market value because you would think the sales price is the fair market value. So that then leads us to assessment appeals. So if we don't think it's properly assessed, then we ask for an assessment increase. So those are all in the budget right now. We're hoping that they come in, better than we were projecting, but we don't know that right now.
And I know I should know this from the slide you just showed, but what is our drop dead once date where we can't change our tax increase after that date? The month that we have to let it sit for a month. So what is that last date?
June 16th.
June 16th,
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then each of these columns shows the assessed value of 100,000 and what that tax increase would mean. We don't have the median assessed value, but last year it was 152,850. So you can see that $68 for the median assessed value. That means that half the people would be getting less than a $68 increase, and the other half would be getting more. And if it's a $300,000 assessment, which means it's about a $650,000 house, they would be paying about $134 with the current recommended tax increase that's included in the final final proposed budget.
And the second column, the cumulative, that's theoretically what they're paying in total? So
Yes, yeah, that would be the total.
So if there was no tax increase, the bottom right number is kind of what they're paying today?
Excuse me?
So theoretically, the last column number, right, or sorry, the last row is theoretically what they're paying today, because that would be a zero tax increase.
Well, the top number is what they're currently paying. So you can see that a $100,000 house is paying a $2,000.
Oh, gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah. The bottom line is if it would be a 1% tax increase, so there would be, another 10 rows below that, but I hid those just for purposes of the presentation. Any questions on the budget presentation?
I can never get this microphone. Sorry. Just for that 30-day window that Sue was just talking about, what does that look like in terms of gathering input and feedback? Like, what protocols or opportunities are there for the public to see, learn, engage with this process?
Well, we are currently working on the 2028. It'll be ready to be published the day after our meeting on April 22nd. We'll put it on our website and make an announcement that it's out there for review. And we'll say if anybody has any questions, they can call the business office. We would address any issues they might have or explain what we're trying to do.
Plus our monthly finance committee meetings and the board business meeting.
Right.
I just didn't know if there was other opportunities outside of the normal meetings that we have for the community to engage in this. I was curious.
Normally what we do is we'll take the 2028 and we'll put a cover sheet on it, say for public review, and we'll have it available in the business office if anybody wants to see it. But most of the time, putting it on the web, people look at it there. Okay. All right, and then so the next agenda item. So is the Finance Committee okay with putting that final proposed budget on the agenda for the 21st? Okay. All right, and then the last item on my agenda is the review of the current year's budget, March 2022 compared to March of the last 3 years. Now we put these extra years on because the two in the middle haven't been, quite normal at all. So the last normal year would be the 18-19 year. And you can see that if you read my analysis very quickly, our transfer taxes are up, our interim taxes are up, our EIT taxes are above projection. Now, I don't know if that's going to continue because we still have people working from home and not going into Philadelphia. So when they work from home, they only pay the 1% earned income tax, and we get that money. If they work in Philadelphia, they have to pay the higher Philadelphia wage tax rate, and we don't get that money. So as long as they're working from home, it's better for the school district. So we'll see how long that lasts. But we got a nice delinquent settlement early in the fiscal year, and that's helped bolster us. So you can see that comparing our revenue through March, 3/4 of the year through, we're at 90% of what we expected versus the last 3 years we're right around 87%. So we're doing much better with the revenue. And if you look at the expenditures, the last normal year through March, we were at 64%. This year we're at 62.25. Would be higher if we could get some more bus drivers, but our excess revenue over expenditures is 27.88, which is very close to last year's through March, and we know that we had a pretty good year last year. So things are looking good for this year. And with only 3 months to go, we just put the spending freeze on of the buildings April 1st. It's not an April Fool's joke. We do that every year. So we do allow for, we just ask the teachers to plan, get all their supplies for the next 2 months in order before April starts. And for the most part, they're used to that. So we're feeling really good about how the budget's working out so far this year. Any questions about this year's budget? Okay, and with that, that's the end of my agenda.
No public comment.
I do. So we've mentioned this before. Our population study that we did for growth in the district, I think, ends maybe with next school year or the school year after. I know it's coming quick.
It's time to do another one.
So I'm just curious what the process is. We do not have nothing to do with that. You guys do that. You figure that out.
Dave and I were actually talking about it last week.
But I don't know if we have to vote on it or make it happen. But
We'll bring an agreement forward, hopefully
Okay.
within a month, to do one over the summer for the next 5 years.
Awesome.
So we're looking at 3 different companies, 1 local, 2 national. So we'll analyze those, see that's the best proposal, and we'll bring it forward.
Wonderful. Yeah, so for the newer board members, it was super useful and helped us figure out how big of a middle school to build and what to do as we know our grades are growing and moving through the district. So obviously we'll need to know. Keep on going.
Just to tag off of that, when we do submit for someone to do that survey, how long would it usually take for them to complete that?
It depends on the firm and the data that they use. So we supply, generally, we supply our enrollment for each of our grades. Some firms use live birth data in the county. Some look at transfer of property and look at census data. So some of them can get done in a month. Some take a little bit longer. I suspect that we'll be able to have it in time for the fall. And so for some planning for the next 3, 5, 7 years. We combine that too with the housing starts the data we get from the 3 municipalities. So biggest concern are the number of what I would refer as high density apartment and condo type properties that seem to be coming on board, particularly in Conshohocken. And then today I was at Plymouth during when students arrived, and we have several families that now live right across the street, and they were walking their kids over. So that was, and they're still, the entrance is open finally on the Plymouth Road side. Before it was over off of you had to make a left. You can't, but if you're walking your kids to school, you can cut across, yeah.
And would you happen to know how we're comparing with kindergarten registrations so far this year?
I do. We're not at the same pace as last year, but we're still large. So we're the current kindergarten next year is projected to be 490 in first grade. So that'll be our biggest class. It is our biggest class currently. But we think some of that was due to COVID and folks stayed home. Most of our other kindergarten classes around that the past few years have been 390 to 420. So a 490 is a bit of an outlier. We're on pace to be around 400 this year, maybe a little bit bigger. Right now we have over 300 partially registered. We have about 200 fully registered, but if you don't, folks are still bringing in some of the materials they need to bring in. And then we have, sometimes folks, families will wait until later in the summer to decide if they're going to send or not. So we track all of that. But I suspect they're going to be in the 400 to 420 range, like the current first and second grade classes.
Is there one school that where we feel like it's going to be higher than others? Like, is Conchi going to have most of those students?
No, right now it's falling in line with our current trends. So Plymouth generally has the largest classes, followed by Ridge, White Marsh, and then Conshohocken. So we'll do the enrollment study, and then Dave included in the budget. We're expecting potential growth in the elementary division, so we put in a couple positions for teacher positions. So I'll also this summer share with the board our K-3 class sizes, and we try to remain as equitable as possible among the 4 elementary schools. Obviously the most difficult one is Conshohocken because it's our smallest. So for example, if you have a grade with 54 students, you're not going to have 2 sections of 27 in second grade. You're simply not going to do that. You'll have 3, which might bring their average to 17 or 18. And then at Plymouth, if we have 8 sections, we might be at 19 or 20. But that's just, we try to stay within a student or 2. It's clearly imperfect. But Conchahocken's the toughest one. And generally, with my luck, it usually falls on numbers like that, 54 and 63. That's another one. Some of the tougher numbers where you're trying to decide, do we go to a 4th section or do we stay at 3 sections, those types of things. We're about to do that with the high school master schedule. Their students are registering, and Steve and Jason will come over with the high school schedule, and we'll take a look at we go discipline by discipline, class by class, and review all the class sizes. And this board has always supported very competitive class sizes, and we try to stay as tight as we can, but we also have a fiscal responsibility. So it's certainly a balancing act, but we'll go through all of that. And the current 5th grade is 430 some, so there'll be about 445, 450 going in. So I'm glad the new school's open. So we have 3 rooms that are currently not being used, but they'll be used next year. They're being used, but we had a little space to move in, but that's why we built it, because we know we're going to need those rooms.
With that being said, we're adjourned.